2021. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Janice, are you taking a roll?
Well. Mrs. Grabanowski. Here. Mr. Franz.
Present.
Mr. Jones.
Present.
Mrs. Walker.
Present.
Mr. Lake.
Present.
Mr. Fedor.
Present.
Ms. Madrick.
She was going to come attend remotely. Do you see her online yet?
It's not sending.
All right, if she does join, would you let us know?
This is Cindy. Can you hear me?
Note that in the.
Ms. Madrick.
Can you hear me?
Ms. Madrick, we're taking attendance, please.
I'm present. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have all 7 members present. So 4 votes for any matter to be passed. In your packet was a set of minutes from the August 16th meeting. Is there any comments, additions, deletions? If there are none, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Is
So moved.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by aye. Opposed by nay. Minutes are approved. On the docket, we have several continuance and other requests. So first on the docket, number is 2021-36 DP Brickyard Solar, various properties in Union Township. Request, it's petition for development plan approval of a solar farm and various properties in northern Union Township with all the properties zoned rural general agriculture. There's a request to withdraw the petition. Is there any discussion, comments on this? If there are none, is there a motion to withdraw the petition?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? With Cindy remote, should we be taking these? Okay. Janice, could you please do roll call on these?
Mr. Franz.
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mrs. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Lake.
Aye.
Mr. Fedor.
Aye.
Ms. Madrick.
Aye.
That petition is granted 7-0. Next on the docket, we have 3 related to the towns at Appaloosa. 2021-39 CA, which is 10901 East 300 South and 3201 South US 421. Petition for commitments amendment to modify commitments associated with Plan Commission approval of docket 2020-04 CA recorded in the Office of the Recorder of Boone County, Indiana as instrument number 2020-13511. Docket number 2021-37 PP, same address. Petition for primary plat approval to allow for 124 lots, 4 being common areas in the rural GB general business and rural PB professional business zoning district. And docket number 2021-38 DP, same address. Petition for development plan approval to provide for development of an 18 plus or minus acre site to accommodate 121 townhomes and 4 common areas in the rural GB general business and rural PB professional business zoning district. Is the petitioner present?
Yes, Mr. President, for the record, my name is Matt Price, attorney for Pulte Homes of Indiana. You may recall at our August meeting, we received a number of comments on this proposal, and I think really shortly after that meeting in August, we concluded that we needed additional time to submit revisions to our plans, which we're actively pursuing now, and we respectfully ask for a second continuance to the October meeting of the Plan Commission.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments?
I have a little bit. I think after this came before the BZA previously, just this last session, I think after the meeting, I asked Wayne O'Hara a question or two about any possible setting up kind of a separate committee to maybe discuss this project since it's the best way to describe it is it was not particularly well received, and trying to find a way to help the petitioner assemble something that might work for everyone's best interests. So what is the process for that?
So certainly the Plan Commission from time to time has set up special committees. Those committees membership is identified in a public setting, and commission membership attends those meetings to work more directly with the petitioner if there's specific goals or objectives that have been articulated that the Plan Commission would like to work on to get the petition a little bit closer to something that would come back to a hearing for full consideration. So that's the process. It's something that you've done, I believe, on South Village, and a few years closer in history would be the Dairy Queen. That might be the last time you had to set up a special committee.
Does anyone else have any interest in doing anything like this?
I'd be more than happy to participate.
Should I reach over there and twist your arm?
We're good. I will participate if we form a committee.
We can have up to 3 members if somebody else wants to.
I did the Dairy. I remember doing the Dairy Queen one, so, and I think the last one as well. So I'm more than happy to as well.
All right.
I've never done one, but I'd be happy to help.
Boom. Take it.
No, I'm not another way. You do it.
Well, we can only have 3.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right, so he's recommending that we take that up at other business at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
So, all right, so we've got a request for continuance on these matters. Any further discussion? If there is not, is there a motion? Can you continue all 3 of these matters until the October 18th meeting?
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by aye.
aye.
I have to take a roll call, sorry.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski. Aye. Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Lake,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Ms. Madrick. She's no longer on.
She's dropped off. All right, so let us know if she jumps back on. But there's still 6 votes. The matter passes. Continuance is granted. Next on the docket is 2021-46 RP FBO Services Inc., 10-825 Andre Drive. Petition for replat to approval to subdivise lot 10 in the Andre Industrial Park in the urban I-2 General Industrial Zoning District. Is petitioner present?
Yes. For the record, Mr. President, Mike Andrioli, 1393 West Oak Street. I represent FBO Services. This is a replat. We are requesting that this matter be tabled and continued to your October meeting. The basis for that is that when we did the replat, it was in order to sell the office building out there that FBO Services had, and the new prospective owner wants a separate address. So we needed to go ahead and replat from 10 lots to 10 and then 11. Problem is, subsequently to the filing of the replat, there was a closing on the property. The purchase bought it, and the legal descriptions don't match up between what they purchased and what we had proposed for the plat. There's an easy fix for that. We met with the parties this morning and are going to be able to solve that and provide the additional information to staff. But we did not have an opportunity to be able to get all of that done and reviewed for tonight's meeting. We'll have all of that completed and well in advance to staff, so they have an opportunity to take a look at it for the October meeting. So we would respectfully request that this be tabled until then. All the notices have been submitted to staff.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on this one? If not, is there a motion
So,
Continue this matter to next month.
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Janice, please.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski. Aye. Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Lake,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Ms. Madrick.
Aye.
She's back on, so. All right, that matter is continued. The vote is 7-0. See you next month. Another late item up here, docket number 2021-41Z, Lennar Homes of Indiana LLC, 2301 South US 421, 1008 and 11201 East 200 South. Petition for zone map change, rezone 119 plus or minus acres from the rural AG agricultural zoning district and rural MRO Michigan Road overlay zoning district to a rural R3 single family and two family residential zoning district in the rural MRO Michigan Road overlay zoning district. It's come to our attention late this afternoon that there's a failure to properly notice. So we've been advised this matter needs to be continued to next month. Petitioner.
Hi, my name is Rick Lawrence, for the record. I'm an attorney with law firm Nelson and Frankenberger, 550 Congressional Boulevard in Carmel, Indiana. Represent Lennar Homes of Indiana, and you are correct. Over the weekend, we noticed there was a defect in the noticing that names were provided by the auditor's office. And also the staff had recommended a continuance to try to address a couple issues with the traffic impact study. So we're formally requesting a continuance to the October 18th meeting, please.
All right, thank you. Any discussion on this matter? If not, is there a motion to continue this matter to the October 18th meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Janice, would you please take roll?
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski. Aye. Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Lake,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Mrs. Madrick.
Aye.
That vote carries 7-0. Continue to next month. Thank you. On to continued business from last month.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I want to go ahead and just take a moment and ask if anybody's online who would like to.
Okay. Sure. Is there, Joe, can you check to see if there's anybody online, if they want to be recognized? Yeah, if you are online, please raise your hand if you would like to be recognized. Sherry Leffler, so noted. All right, thank you.
And I would note on my system, I show a Mr. Eubank has emailed in and a Mr. Rowack, not sure I'm saying the last name correctly. I'll email them back.
Okay. All right, first on the docket from last month is 2021-31Z, Pulte Homes of Indiana, Goodwin Properties, 8666 East 400 South. Petition for zone map change, rezone 68.691 plus or minus acres from the rural R1 low density, single family residential zoning district to an R2, rural R2 low density, single family and two family residential zoning district. Petitioner present. Mr. Price, do you know if this was noticed with first class mail or registered mail?
It was done with first class mail.
Okay, so we need a motion to allow for proper notice with first class mail. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We do that by acclamation. All in favor signify by aye. Opposed by nay. All right, thank you. Continue, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, for the record, my name is Matt Price, and I'm with the Denton's Law Firm in Indianapolis here tonight on behalf of Pulte Homes with regard to docket number 2021-31Z, which is the proposed rezoning of the Goodwin farm property. Joe, if you go to the first slide. Just to orient the Plan Commission with the proposal. This is just a little over 68 acres in the northwest corner of County Road 400 and County Road 875 E. And we've taken a aerial view just to show some of the development pattern that's in the general vicinity. Immediately, well, not immediately, there's a row of single-family homes along 875, but just behind those homes is the Rockbridge subdivision to the east. And then to the southwest, you see part of Hampshire. And then further to the southeast is additional single-family residential being the preserve at Spring Knoll. And really, each one of those three subdivisions have been developed utilizing the RSF2 subdivision classification under Zionsville's zoning ordinance for urban property. So each one of those is of a similar density to that being proposed here this evening. Go to the next slide. Thank you. This is just a little bit of a closer in shot showing the homes immediately east of the proposed Goodwin property rezoning, and then Rockbridge, the preserve in the southeast. Then immediately south of our proposal on the west side of 875, you see some of the additional land uses that are in the vicinity. In the south west corner is the park property. Then as you proceed west, there's the substation. If you go a little further west, there's a cell tower. Then the property itself is bisected by some power lines, which we'll show. And again, this is kind of a shot that shows the area subdivision as well. Go to the next slide. This is the proposed concept plan for the project with and a depiction of the anticipated landscaping. Let me just point out just a few things about the property. We are contemplating two access points, one off of 875, which we call our eastern entrance, which is onto the far right-hand side of the picture. And then the second one is our southern entrance, which is off of County Road 400. Each of those will have a split entryway, meaning they'll have a dedicated entrance and exit, as is certainly customary to development in Zionsville, and also requested as a recommendation as part of our traffic study. We also anticipate including turn lanes along both 875 and County Road 400. We are planning for 106 dwelling units on the property. Gives us a density of just a little over 1.5 units per acre. A little over 30% of the property is open space, and that excludes the area beneath the power lines as well as the wet portions of the water features or detention areas on the property, to give you a feel for the real open space, if you will. Go to the next slide. We have made an effort to reach out to adjoining neighbors to discuss some of the site-specific concerns that they had with regard to this proposal, and really the impacts of some other projects that have been built as an effort to see how the development of this parcel in the future could help improve their individual situations and certainly not exacerbate any existing conditions that they have today. So one of the things that we've been mindful of is that for the exiting cars that we contemplate, that we want to minimize and hopefully prevent any kind of headlights shining onto adjoining homes on the eastern side of 875. And so we put together this exhibit that shows a couple of different vantage points from the neighbor who is across from our entryway. The exit lane would be pointing towards her garage, and we'll show you, or her driveway. We'll show you a couple of vantage points here. The next slide. This is the view from her property looking back northwest towards the entryway to the proposed property. And we have another view as well. And this is the view looking southwest, again from the property owner's property. you go to the next slide. Wanted to show some of the anticipated home designs. We are looking at between 2,500 and 3,000 square feet. We think the home sale prices will be in excess of $475,000 each, based on comparable sales in Zionsville and in other marketplaces that are offering similar product lines. Go to the next slide. Each of the homes is very nicely completed with many of the features that you see in Zionsville homes. Then we show a little bit of the streetscape, anticipated streetscape from a light community here. Go to the next slide. And an additional example here. I did want to point out that a 3-car garage is an option for the home styles. Also, each of them include an alternative for additional flex storage space as well, in lieu of the 3-car garage, but either one are options are available. One of the things that I also wanted to mention, and we can get into more detail as the discussion ensues, but in the course of meeting with the residents on the east side of 875, there's been some questions about landscaping treatments for their properties, both on the Goodwin side of the street and potentially on their side of the street, to provide some additional screening. And those discussions have evolved to the point where there have been written, what I'll call written commitments, which I'm happy to share with you and submit as part of the record this evening to show the precise communications that have been made to those individual homeowners. There's also kind of a broader discussion about the drainage and the function of the existing drainage, particularly south and southwest of this development, and then as you go further, really further east. And what's been done to date is what I would call kind of a field investigation to determine exactly what the condition of the existing drainage improvements are and the functioning of the existing legal drain. And at this stage in the process, we have not arrived at particular drainage solutions, although it appears that those solutions are available, but would require additional coordination with those homeowners that are affected by the existing drainage conditions, as well as the county surveyor's office. And we've been in contact with the county surveyor as well about these very issues, and we've had a detailed discussion about that with the property owner for whom that's a particularly important issue, which I'd like to make those communications a part of the record. And I have individual copies. I can also submit them to Wayne, which I'm happy to do. I should have introduced them at the beginning, but let me just introduce my team real quick, and then we can open it up to communications and questions. With Pulte, I have Dave Compton, Robin Crawford, and then our engineer, Brandon Burke. And any one of the 4 of us are available to answer any questions that you have. We'd respectfully request a favorable recommendation this evening and would be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. At this point in time, is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this matter? Please step forward, state your name, address.
My name is Margaret Eady. I live at 3875 South, 875 East. And you'll know my house is the entrance lights will go right into it. So I'd like to bring to your attention that one layout we showed you may look very similar, because in the fall of 2006, Beazer came to the town council asking for 120 homes to be built on that land. And according to Beazer, was 71 plus or minus acres. In the spring of 2000, and you guys turned it down. In the spring of 2017, Beazer came back and asked for 108 houses to be built on that land. And there was an article that it was declined by the board. And if you look at that proposed layout, it is very similar to what they want to do with their existing one. The changes were on the far end, which was farther away from 875. So I would like the town to consider still keeping it as R1. And the thing that bothers us the most, and I'm speaking for myself, is that we now have what we refer to as the 875 corridor, since we have the roundabout. So there's a lot of land that is on the 875 corridor. So what potentially could be determined on this particular piece of land is basically going to affect all of 875. We moved out into what was then the country for peace and quiet and open space. And with this subdivision being across the street from us, we're losing part of our country space. And we understand something's going to be developed there that we didn't anticipate, or nor do we like to have high density housing. And in one of the street diagrams they showed how close the houses are. So if you look at where 875 is now to my land, there's only 4 houses. So if you look at what they're presenting 8 houses. So when we look out our windows, we're just going to see house after house after house. The bad thing for us is we're going to see the backside. So we're going to see a bunch of flat boxes across our street. And that's not something that we would like to have. So we would like them to go back to the drawing board and come up with some kind of a plan where we don't have 106 houses located on that particular space. And, you know, we do have Spring Knoll Preserve that was behind us. We did have commitments from that developer that didn't come to fruition. And so we appreciate Pulte, you know, coming to us and asking us questions and putting things in writing. I haven't got my official written letter yet. But the only thing that I'm asking for is some kind of a barrier to prevent the lights from coming into my house. I'm not asking for anything else. I don't even expect them to do that, but I do appreciate them doing that. But the most important thing is I think the density for that particular land of 106 houses is too much. And I have a feeling it's going to impact whatever else we do on the 875 corridor. And I don't think that's what Zionsville wants, is high density. Thank you for your time.
Quick question. So you are on the east side of 875?
Correct.
Okay.
So if you look at that site diagram,
You just noted you'd be looking at the back of 8 houses and you'd be looking at the side of 1 house.
so I'm this house here.
Okay.
So the point that I was trying to make on the one diagram that they presented is here. So this is the diagram that I was referring to. So I'm sitting here. So from 875 over to my house, you'll notice that we have 1 house on the corner,
Yep.
and there's 3 other houses. So I'm considering this lot, my 2 neighbors and myself. So we have 4 houses here.
Okay.
So what they're proposing is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 houses within that same part. So when necessarily for me, when I look out, I'm going to see a multiple of houses. And if you look at the site diagram that they provided here, if you on 2 looking this way, it's interesting because picture says 1,000 words. Because when you look outside of my lot, you don't see the high density housing that they're proposing here. And if you look here, most of these houses are single story homes. So if you look outside my house, and all these are 2-story homes, that's totally distorts what they're presenting in this picture.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that'd like to comment on this matter? Is there anybody online? Oh, come forward.
Good evening. My name is Robin Meyer. I live 4273 South, 800 East in Zionsville. While I'm not across the street from this development, I am in a location that had the Hampshire development completely built around me. We have 3 acres. Most of the neighbors that have been there for 10+ years have 2+ acres. My concern is all these developments come in, same developers, same attorneys represented them, same developments. I mean, they're identical. If you look at anything you guys have approved in the last 5 years, all these developments look exactly the same. Hampshire started out, it was supposed to be a custom home subdivision. It got sold to Beazer. Beazer sold lots to Fisher. Fisher sold lots to Lennar. So what started out as a process that the neighbors thought we were actually getting something of value to our neighborhood ends up being, if you've driven down 800, there's probably 20 houses that from the back look exactly the same. Same windows, same placement, no architectural features whatsoever. It's just a solid wall of ugliness in what used to be a beautiful farm field with a nice woods, lots of wildlife. I know you're going to approve this, you always do, but I would really urge you to not only worry about the front elevations of these homes you're approving, but to think about the back elevations that the people driving down the roads and the neighbors that have been there for years and years and years get stuck looking at. And I also don't understand why the developer can't just develop it as its own. I don't understand why we have all these zoning, and every time these developments come in, they want to rezone so they can cram higher density. He says it's 1.5 houses per acre, but if you take out the required green space, take that acreage and the number of houses, and what is the actual density that these people are wanting to build out there? It's not 1.5. It's probably more like 30. And it's just too much. It looks awful. This is not the look our community is going for. We used to be a quaint little town that we had homes people could be proud of. Now we're just another cookie cutter community. And there's a Facebook group called Zionsville Real Estate. You get on there and you see people and realtors begging for properties that have some land, an acre, half an acre, 2 acres. That's what people want. And these developers will sit here and tell you, oh no, we're building what people want. They're forcing people to buy those types of houses because there's nothing else available. If somebody wants to move to Zionsville, good luck finding a property with some land on it, because you allow these developers to come in and eat up everything with these high density subdivisions. So I've lived here 50 some years. This is my home, this is my community. And it's very sad to see what's happened to it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment? Anybody online? If you'd raise your hand.
Dave.
Oh, yeah, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Bennett. I live at 8470 East 100 South in Zionsville. My concern is in regards to any of the traffic studies that have been done, not just in regards to normal residential or pedestrian like vehicular traffic, but with the recent, and this kind of goes in correlation with the 421 at 200 proposal. We have a lot of bicycle traffic that comes around. I will tell you right now, I'm not a huge fan of the bicycle traffic. However, I do respect them as a part of it. And I feel like with any of the county roads that are off of 800, 875, 200, 400, et cetera, there is a lot of children with a park also across the street off of 875, et cetera. And I'm very concerned, not just for my own kids, but the new school that's going in as well, as to how that's going to affect any sort of development that's going in. And I feel like any sort of moderate versus high density development is going to put not just our kids, at risk, but also any sort of other pedestrian that is choosing to utilize these rural county roads that they have the option for. So with that, I just want to say my 2 cents.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
My name's Dave Meyer. I live at 4237 South 800 East, Zionsville. I just had one question about the 1.5 density. Maybe Matt can answer. Does that take into consideration the utility easements?
Mike, Matt, can you come up and speak into the speaker, please?
I think I actually said a little bit over 1.5 units per acre. Yeah, I was just given a gross density figure. I wasn't, that's what people usually mean when they talk about density. I did not do a net density calculation subtracting open space or utility line easement.
It's my understanding that utility easements are not to be used in determination for density and that they're unbuildable. Wasn't that an ordinance that was changed some time back?
Dwayne?
RSF2 has that specific language. That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there anybody else? Is there anybody online raising their hand? No? Nope, yes.
Hello.
All right, please state your name, address, and please proceed.
Hi, this is Chetan Dave, and my address is 4358 Weatherstone Crossing. I have a question about this new development. Has there been any study done for what it will do for the bottlenecks for middle school and high school? I understand that any kids going to school would be coming to either ZMS or ZCHS, and that area is already bottlenecked, especially between first 2 hour and a half of school and then after school. So has there been any study done what it will do to the traffic in that area? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Wayne, can you speak to the traffic study requirements?
So the traffic study focuses on the site itself. Certainly, the development team can speak to any boundaries or methodologies that the caller might have been interested in knowing about specifically.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further comments, questions? All right, Matt, because I don't think there's any direct questions to you, I'm just going to go ahead and take the staff report and we'll throw it open to the planning commission at that time. Staff report, please.
Staff is in support of this petition, noting that the roads have been improved in this area, that a traffic impact study has been reviewed by the engineer and offered no concerns. Also noting that the town engineer has reviewed and approved the sewer capacity of 106 homes. The R2 zoning is consistent with the surrounding land uses and is within the allowable density of an R2 zoning district. Staff recommends approval of the petition subject to execution of a written zoning commitment indicating that no more than 106 single-family dwellings be contemplated in future plating and development plan petitions for the overall acreage.
All right, thank you. At this point in time, I'll open up to members of the planning commission for any questions.
So I see a level of plantings in the overall landscape plan that I frankly didn't see in the properties to the southwest along 800. I know somebody voiced concern about, when you come down 800, you just see all the backs of the houses. This landscape plan looks a little more dense, and I assume we can hold them to matching this plan specifically.
Well, and through the development plan, that is all worked through. In addition, I wanted to add that staff has already let us know that a 10-foot pedestrian pathway would be required along all perimeter roadways.
Okay. I just want to make sure that, if we're approving this, what we see is what we get, and we're not going to have the landscape pared down after this approval, because I think it affects the residents on particularly 875 East, but it does affect those views. So.
Well, I mean, we're doing the zoning now, so obviously there's gonna be primary plat and the development plan, that's where that's gonna get captured, so you just have
It's
to.
more of a comment for the
Yeah,
petitioner
yeah.
to
It's
note
being,
that if they come back without it.
and it's being represented here, so we can
Yeah.
definitely refer to this.
Well, and certainly if the plan commission is so inclined to include it as a commitment, substantial compliance with the site plan submitted, paying very close attention to the size, spacing, and species of plantings as illustrated, certainly would go distance here to incorporate that.
Yes, and I would recommend that if Mr. Lake, if you feel strongly that you would want the landscape not to be any less than what has been represented, that you make that a condition of any approval, because at the development plan level, the petitioner would only be required to meet the ordinance.
Yeah, code minimum. Okay.
Anybody else? Ms. Price, you said that you discussed actually, I mean, if I interpreted this correctly, putting additional landscaping across the street on the other private property.
We did. If I may, I would say it's somewhat tailored to each property owner that we met with. And if I could provide the actual verbiage.
Sure.
What we have done is provided specific tailored commitment language to the Inmans, which does involve planting landscaping on their property to provide additional screening. I believe Dave Compton could elaborate on this, but I believe that's the property owner immediately north of Mrs. Ide. And then Mrs. Ide's property, and she made an allusion to this when she was speaking. We had proposed to her installing a privacy fence not to exceed 12 feet in length in the northwest corner of her property at Pulte's expense as well. And she mentioned not receiving that correspondence, and I'd be happy to provide you with a copy of that.
Sure, come forward, please.
So Robin and Dave did come to my house and we talked about these sight lines and all this other kind of stuff. At the time of the conversation, I told them I don't know what I want because I don't know the exact impacts on the lights into my property. I also indicated that I have a lot of trees already on my property, so tree is not necessarily maybe an option that I wanted to go to. So the commitment that I got from them was that they said that I would have time to decide what I wanted to do, and that, we could work this out. So the first commitment of definitely a fence was discussed, of having a fence, but that was not the official agreed upon topic of what I was actually going to do on my property.
Okay.
For the record, Dave Compton, Margaret, good to see you again. Absolutely correct. We want to get something of record in front of you. We agreed that once we got houses actually occupied on that side of the street, that we need to go back out and meet with Margaret and make sure that fence was good enough. But that was our initial discussion with a corner fence. We set an example. Could be a different style or anything like that. But I will go on the public record as an authorized representative of Pulte Homes to say, this is the minimum, what we're providing to the plan commission and staff. And then we agree, of course, Margaret, once we get the first house occupied, because we won't really know how those lights come out until they're actually there. So I've been told to bring Long's Donuts and some Traders Point chocolate milk, and we're gonna watch the cars come out. But in all seriousness, we understand we won't have this is a start. If we need to do more, we will. We also said the same thing to the neighbors to the north. We kind of laid out 4 to 5 arborvitae that are very similar to what they have in their front yard. If we can put a mound in and it doesn't block drainage on Margaret's property, we will. If we can't, commit it to the arborvitae, study it with our engineer. But again, we understand there's car lights coming out, and the best way to identify that is on their property once we've got a house occupied. So you are absolutely correct, and we are committed to that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And then the other part of our conversation and the original diagrams that they gave us, I noticed that there was a discrepancy of where some of the lot lines were and this, that, and another. And he sent me an email and said, yep, you're right. Some of this is off and some of this is off. But I'm assuming that the pole, the light pole that's in my yard is still the center line for the entrance of the subdivision. Or did you, because you sent me the new plans that were not updated because they still look the identical.
No, they were the new. When Margaret's referring to the exhibit that's in the package. What happened was originally when we worked off of GIS, the GIS map was off about 3 feet. It showed her property line about 3 feet further south than it should have been. So we adjusted the property line to the north using deeds and the land title survey. So we used Margaret's deeds plus the Goodwin's deeds, cross triangulated it, and we knew. And so what we did was re-overlay that on a new aerial, which was included what I sent you. And then when we did that, that actually adjusted everything to the south about 5 feet after we made the property line adjustment. So again, when you're working off of GIS on these websites, it's not 100% accurate. Brandon, our engineers here, I want to make sure I don't speak out of turn. So what you have in your package and what you have in Margaret has in her email is now factually correct. So when you pull out of this driveway, the good news is by shifting everything about 5 feet to the south, we were able to have the car lights shine more on your driveway than on the corner of your house. Now we're still, again, committed to walk out and meet after we have houses occupied. Again, what's in the package and what's in the email dated Friday, September 17th at 2:42 p.m. to Margaret is the minimum that we will do. So thank you for that clarification. But I believe we are now correct in what we're depicting, right, Brandon? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So please tell me if I can't speak. There was
Close to the microphone.
there was an engineer report in the traffic studies. Since we have lived there with the additions of Rockbridge, Hampshire, and also Spring Knoll Preserve, and Jay can attest to this, there's a lot more accidents that have happened on the corner of 400 and 875. The road improvements that they're talking about in the area are paving the road that's closer to Hampshire. We have had no road improvements in our area forever, and 875 is falling apart because of all the construction traffic. So that comment concerns me, because unless we do something with 875 and 400, we will continue to have more accidents in that corner, because it's only a two-way stop, and the cross traffic on 875 does not have to stop. And Jay probably can make more comments because she lives close to that corner.
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Jay Donathan and I live at 3955 South 875 East. And I've lived there for 20 years. What Margaret is talking about is the fact that very few people stop at 400. I've had a dump truck take out an S10 pickup because 875 doesn't stop. Well, 400 does not realize 875 doesn't stop. There is no signage saying it does not stop on, sorry, I have to sit there and think about that. I guess it'd be on the east side of 400. So whenever you're driving, and I just drove it yesterday, there's a stop sign, but it does not say cross traffic does not stop on that side. That's usually the spot that the traffic speeds across and gets hit. My house is just north of that. I'm not the house on the corner, I'm the next one. At this exact moment, I have $500 worth of property damage from a car accident. So I moved here for the country, for the schools. I don't want to lose it. I know what's going to happen. I'm just going to be 100% honest. I would rather that have a half acre, 3/4 of an acre lots, so they're similar to what we have. I mean, there's no stopping it. I understand that. But at the same time, I don't want to see anybody die on that corner. Because I'm the one who walks out of her front door to those car accidents. I'm the one who has to explain to my children, my grandchildren, if and whenever that happens. I'm sorry, we can't play in the front yard because there's a fire truck and ambulances out there because there's a car accident. It kills me to see Zionsville blowing up the way it has. I'm sorry to say that. I feel like I came here and we were more of a village. We are becoming a metropolis more than anything. I hate saying that, but that's how I feel. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Well, certainly appreciate the comments very much. I think maybe just to talk about one of the points that was raised about the scope of our traffic study, and we were asked to update our traffic counts to include background traffic levels because of other development activity that's occurred around this property. And that report came back and indicated that the intersection of 400 and 875 still functioned at an A or B level, given background traffic counts and including the traffic counts anticipated from this project, if it's approved.
You know why that's not, I mean, I realize this is out of your control and it's controlled by the county, but is there been any discussion to make that a four-way stop that you're aware of?
No, I have not heard that discussion. No, and I'm not certain what like in the traffic signal vernacular. They measure that once it hits a certain trigger before you can get a light. I don't know if there's a similar thing for a stop sign or if that's more discretionary. My hunch is that's probably more discretionary.
Wayne, do you have any? Are you aware of what it would take?
I'm not aware of what that would take off.
Okay.
I wouldn't think it'd take much at all to get a sign that says that coming in,
Doesn't
the cross
stop.
traffic doesn't stop. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer.
If that's an issue, I think Pulte would be fine. We could certainly discuss that matter with the county and see if that's something we could get accomplished as a condition as well. I think we used some language in the prior project about a good faith effort to obtain a change in signage.
So the last time this was before us, I think it was 120 homes. And I can't remember the specific reasons, why that was denied or given it unfavorable. How did you guys settle at 106 homes? I'm just kind of curious what the logic behind that was, given the fact that 120 was given it unfavorable.
Well, I mean, I think it was looking at a layout that made sense. There was some, I think in reading the record, which I've spent some time with, there was some sense, I think, that the former petitioner perhaps got to the right place, but got there a little late. And that maybe their proposal was early in the sense that some of the surrounding road improvements were contemplated, but not completed at that time. And so what's happened over time is that the project has not gone forward and been developed for R1 usages. But in the meantime, the north-south connector has been completed, the roundabout's been constructed. Many of the roads, including 800 and large sections of 400, have been widened or resurfaced or both. And I think that's a real credit to the town. It's followed through on its master planning as far as transportation improvements at a macro level with regard to 875 and the roundabout, but it's also done it on a project by project basis with regard to the requirement for perimeter road improvements. And so as Hampshire has been phased in, those improvements have been made. When you drive down 800 today, it's substantially better condition than it was.
Yeah, I can back up what Matt was saying about the previous 2016 petition. As a member of the commission then, the petitioner got to the door, but never actually opened it. And as a member of the commission, we can't reach out and open the door for them. So they never got there. It got denied. Speaking to this project, that they've dropped the count down to 106. I do appreciate the setbacks for both trail along 875 and also along 400. I can appreciate everyone's comment about what is always called density of housing. When you look at the amount of open space surrounding those lots, it'll actually read more as a larger, more open development than what's previously been provided. The final little piece is always, it's interesting. We hear this about, why do we end up with these kind of developments over and over again? And someone with 30 years experience in construction, the small builder model, as well as developers who used to create subdivisions for them, just does not exist. The capital requirement to put in roads and sewers and actually answer questions regarding drainage and other both amenity and life safety issues just make it very, very difficult for any individual smaller group to take on a project of any scope. So you're either, you get presented these, or, you get single lots, or we get farm fields cut up into, a set of 10-acre parcels. But the 2 or 3 acre parcel with the paved road and well and septic just don't exist. I don't think it's even allowed by current codes to do something like that. So anyways, that's all I got.
All right.
Shut up. Sure.
I'm Julia Ward, and I live at 8475 East 400 South, so I'd be right across the street from the Pulte. And with regard to the road studies that have been going on previous, we have to remember there's several factors that are changing. First of all, we just got the roundabout open, and yes, that's a improvement, the roundabout that connects here with 875, but it's also going to lead to more traffic. Because that's now a throughway that never used to be a throughway. And with regards to 400, we have all the development on the Holiday Farms over by Michigan Road. The quickest way to get out to 65 now, if you're going to go 334, you cut through over on 400. That's a easy access for people on Holiday Farms. Not to mention that we now have the on-ramp to 65, which 400 turns into the Albert White roadway that takes you out to 465. So with all these developments that are also, planned for 200 and the Holiday Farms and everything that is now going to be east, a lot of that traffic's going to cut through on 400. So 400 has been widened because I know it's been widened by my house. But there's also going to be a lot of increased traffic between the schools and the road openings. So there's a lot of issues that traffic studies for right now that have been up to this point are really not going to see until next year. So I really think a lot of that roads and the slowing down the cars coming from 300, 146th Street crosses over to 875. They come flying down 875 because 875 used to be the little highway, the little country highway into Zionsville. And those cars still do not want to slow down when they hit, because I know my mother-in-law also lives on 350. There's that little hill right there, and you just, pray when you come out of there sometimes that somebody's not flying over that hill ready to take you out, and they don't slow down until maybe they get to Spring Knoll if you're lucky. So the traffic in that area, it needs to slow down and it needs to improve in those areas.
Thank you.
I have the article from 2017 that shows the diagram of 106 homes that the town council turned down. And I would like to show it to you guys if I can, so you can compare how what they're proposing, especially in the front half, is almost identical to what they're proposing currently, and the back half is changed slightly on how they graphed this part. And this is what you guys also turned down in 2017. So if you want to see this, I can show this to you.
I don't know if it's necessary, because I think the reason that it was explained that it was turned down was because of the construction roads around it. They weren't developed at that point. So the fact that, this is similar, I don't think that is really arguably relevant when you consider the other factors that are involved at this point in time.
Yeah, because like I indicated on 875, the only construction improvements they've done is at and I can't remember the name of the road, but it's by the Ashbourne development. That roundabout has been developed. On 400, they have done improvements on the road by Hampshire. They paved 800, but all those road improvements have nothing to do on 875. And I would like to know when the traffic study was done, because if it was done last year, half of Zionsville is in remote learning. And if you're in remote learning, 875 is a heavily trafficked road on the mornings, people going to and from schools. And now that we're adding a Trailside Elementary, the traffic is just going to increase on our road. So, it'd be interesting.
We
to see when
understand.
the traffic study was done.
Thanks.
August of 2021. And depending when in August, here again, some kids may or may not.
They met the requirements that was necessary for the traffic study. We have to go by what they produce. I'm sorry.
And I would note too that these road improvements typically come after the development, so that the road improvements aren't torn up by the construction traffic. They're widened and then repaved generally when a lot of the construction, or at least the heavy site work, has already been completed. So we've seen that on 800, on portions of 400. 400, you go to good section of road, bad section of road, good section of road, and that's where those developments have been. So I think we're seeing that the road improvements are happening just after the major site work on those roads have been done.
Is there anything else?
The part of this would come with this is the rezone. And the next step would be when it's platted. So some of those kinds of things can be handled that way, as opposed to trying to stick it in the rezone.
I think we're going to get the commitments relative to the landscaping.
Yeah.
Incorporated the commitments relative to the properties adjacent across the street into this. Some of those things, when you talk about the roads, that's out of our control. So Those are issues. I mean, we've got the traffic study that shows, A, B at the worst at this point in time, which I'm telling you, as the traffic study goes in Zionsville, this is a rare thing indeed. So.
Okay, just wanted to make sure where those things came, because I live out there too.
Yep.
So I understand that the cross traffic does not stop sign would be a really nice thing to be added, because I go through there. I live on the part of 400 that hasn't been widened and hasn't been improved. So I go that way all the time. But that would be something that we might pursue. Correct?
Well, they stated that they would
Right.
investigate, if
Do
they
you
could
want
put
it in
those,
writing?
the no stopping on the cross traffic signs. I mean, you have to get approval from, I'm assuming, the county on that.
Right.
So, all right.
Just wanted to reiterate.
Wayne?
Say, Mr. Francis, since a couple of different projects have been mentioned, thought I'd take a moment to take a little bit of history here. Certainly, Mr. Franz and Mr. Jones specifically were on the Plan Commission, certainly for a number of those projects that were mentioned. But certainly want to focus on the landscaping plan. Certainly, as it's been indicated, the Plan Commission, you often see items, and then certainly they come back to you and they might be a little bit different. Certainly on this specific landscape plan, we do see street trees and we do see other trees that probably will be in easements. The county roadway system does not encourage street trees, nor does the county drainage board encourage trees in drainage easements. So there are a few things within this conceptual landscape plan that might need to change simply because they might not be embraced by the regulatory authorities that oversee road infrastructure and drainage infrastructure. But certainly, Mr. Lake, as you were focusing on the boundary trees along 875 and 400 South are items of specific interest that have been mentioned. But I do want to just have, for clarity's sake, because it is confusing to the public and certainly to the Plan Commission when there are items that you do see and things that are articulated that do not come back to you because of various regulatory issues. Secondarily, certainly it's great to incorporate into commitments the items that have been mentioned this evening. Certainly, we do know from Hampshire specifically that there were private agreements and commitments negotiated with neighbors that were simply not enforceable by the town because they were not negotiated with the Plan Commission. So certainly, any commitments that are going to be discussed this evening get articulated and put into the commitments. Otherwise, just to be very clear, that private agreements that are negotiated with the developer at some other time outside of this room are not items that the Plan Commission can enforce. So just a little bit of color for you as you move through your proceedings.
All right, thank you. All right, at this point in time, would anybody like to make a motion on this? Would be for favorable, unfavorable?
Chris has to do it.
Yeah, this is gonna be about
No recommendation.
four paragraphs worth of motions here.
You've been working on it?
I have, so
All right.
it's gonna be sloppy a little bit, but bear with me.
It gets the point across. That's all that
All right.
matters.
I move that docket number 2021-31-Z to rezone 68.69 plus or minus acres from the rural R1 residential zoning district to a rural R2 residential zoning district receive a favorable recommendation based on the staff report as presented, with the recommendations being certified to the town council for adoption, pending that the development plan as submitted be in substantial compliance with the site plan relative to landscaping density, quantity, and species at boundary plantings along 875 and 400 South, and that the developer work in good faith with Boone County to get additional traffic signage at the intersection of 875 East and 400 South, and that the commitments made in writing and in public comment to the neighbors on the east side of 875 East be adopted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
I think there's one additional motion that we brought up here a minute ago. That the staff recommends approval of the petition subject to the execution of a written zoning commitment indicating that no more than 106 single-family dwellings be contemplated in the future platting and development plan petitions for the overall acreage.
Is a motion to accept that?
Yes.
Is a second, accept that? All right. Any further discussions? If there's not, Janice, would you please take roll?
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski. Aye. Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mrs. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Lake.
Aye.
Mr. Fedor.
Aye.
Ms. Madrick.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We will forward that to the town council. Mr. President. Next item on the docket is 2021-29 CPA, Town of Zionsville Draft Airport Strategic Land Use Plan. Petition to consider amendments to the Town of Zionsville Comprehensive Plan in order to consider incorporation of the airport strategic land use plan. Since this hearing was already open, we don't need to get approval for the first class mail notice, so.
Well, good evening. My name is Corey Weitzel with HWC Engineering. This was first introduced 2 months ago. It was continued last month. And since it's been a little bit of time, we thought that we would go ahead and back up and make sure that we provide a brief presentation on this so that everyone could be up to speed with it. So I'm going to try to get this going. And in short, as this is getting started, the purpose of this plan was a jointly commissioned plan that was led by both the Town of Zionsville and the Hamilton County Airport Authority. The primary purpose of this has been to figure out how do you achieve an acceptable and appropriate mix of development around the airport that's compatible with the airport. That compatibility is the key phrase in this. And as we're doing that, we also wanted to protect current and future use of the airport while meeting Zionsville's community, economic development, and quality of life goals. So that's the purpose of doing this. And I should mention Stephanie Ward from Mead and Hunt is here, and she's been part of the team that has helped develop this plan. So when we say compatible land uses, I want to define what we mean. When we're talking about an airport, we're talking about tall structures. We're talking about density or concentrations of people. We're talking about noise sensitivity, visual obstructions like smoke or glare, and then wildlife attractants, things like ponds that attract waterfowl that can fly into airplane engines are, a little bit problematic. So as we think about this, we're looking at commercial things are generally considered complementary. Things like light industrial that do not produce light, steam are complementary. A little more intense types of residential uses are considered complementary. Now, suburban residential, we talked about this in the first meeting a little bit, is generally not considered a complementary use right in and around an airport. But as long as you keep moderate amounts of density, you can look at townhomes, apartments, mixed density residential in various types. So to kind of back up and look at what is the impact of an airport on the town of Zionsville, the orange and yellow lines on this, when you overlay it with the town, including the urban and the rural service territories, when you see these lines, these are all dictated by FAA surfaces. This is the mandate. It actually encompasses almost half of the boundaries of Zionsville are in some way impacted by the airport based on the way FAA looks at it. And so we took those areas, and you'll see them in the lighter shading color on that, the lighter green, are what we consider to be the study area, which are the undeveloped areas of town that are influenced by the airport. And from that analysis, the ultimate deliverable out of this plan is a future land use plan, which is a diagram that illustrates those recommended long-term land use. This is ultimately a policy document to help you make decisions in and around the airport as you go forward. But ultimately, it came back to this question that you asked us, where is housing appropriate in this? And to answer that question, we put together a couple diagrams. The first diagram that you're looking at here is that land use map in the background. The red lines represent corporate air traffic. Okay, so these show that traffic is ultimately going toward that north-south runway, and it either comes from the north following 421 and then turns on the south side, or it could, if it's coming from the south, it usually is going to go up through that south runway approach, even though it is possible for them to go to the north and fly towards the south side. Most of the air traffic on this is coming from the south because that's your instrument landing. From this, you can start to see where there is air travel. The traffic pattern that is most of a concern are those areas just immediately north and south of the runways. That's where the planes are flying at a lower elevation. So that's the primary issue. We need to be aware of where there is corporate travel for a lot of these other jets, but it's not as much of an issue because they're a little bit higher of an elevation. The other side of looking at this from what is the impact is where's their general aviation pattern work being flown? And this is just general patterns that are flown around the aircraft, usually by the single engine jets. And what you'll see from that are shown on here, two different boxes, one for the main north-south runway, and then we showed that alternate box around it showing where that traffic is flying for the long-term crosswind runway. Now that's a long-term thing that's not on any plans right now, but we wanted to show that. What we did with laying this out was we pushed residential uses outside of that use. So to the east, that gets into Hamilton County, so that's not really the concern. There's no residential shown on that side. To the west, we kept residential generally west of 1100. And by keeping it west of 1100, that was a fair dividing line to show where most of that travel is occurring. So that's how we push that, those directions. The other thing, just to back up a little bit and show you what you're doing today. So your land use for this today is based on the Union Township plan that was in the Boone County's last comprehensive plan. So when this area was added to the town's corporate limits, this was adopted. And what this called for was a mixed use district around the airport with a lot of agricultural around it, but a fair amount of commercial, a fair amount of residential a little further west, but most of it was agriculture or mixed use around the airport. So what we're trying to do is figure out how do we want to adjust this? What needs to stay the same from what is here and then what needs to change? And so let's first look at what is not changing. And it's really most of it is not changing considerably. So to the north, the things that are in colors are things that are staying the same, and the things that are grayed out are things will change, and we'll cover those in a second. So what's staying the same is agricultural areas to the north are generally staying the same. Low density residential further west, really just west of Eagle Creek, is staying the same. The existing single family residential areas south of the airport are staying the same. There's the landfill, not changing anything there. And then there's some agricultural areas closer to the airport, they're staying the same. The changes that come into this take a few different forms. The first thing, you'll see these green areas north and south of the runway. Those green areas north and south of the runway are agricultural right now. And our recommendation is that they be specifically defined for open space. So a little bit more restrictive than just agriculture, where we just generally want to keep those free of structures, because that's where jets are going to be, or planes are going to be flying the lowest. The other thing that's changing a little bit is just the definition of the airport mixed use districts right in and around the airport. We've clarified that to include a employer district. And in that, we've added some more restrictions than are on there right now, defining that a little bit more in terms of not just businesses, but we heard a lot during this process that what we don't want, which is we don't want to see a bunch of big boxes out here. We don't want to see architecture that is real dense, that doesn't fit within this. So as we talk about employer sites, it still needs to be something that fits in what is surrounding this, a rural landscape. So a lot of open space, good quality architecture, low rise, and we're not talking about 1 million square foot buildings. We're talking about smaller industrial uses that are fully enclosed.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Certainly.
You mentioned the things that the feedback you got and what was incorporated in this document, yet you received feedback from this group. And yet I don't see any feedback incorporated from this group into this comprehensive plan.
I've had questions. I'm not sure that I've received a directive to change anything yet.
Well, this group gave feedback that we feel is pretty important because it affects the way that we have to implement this plan. And none of that feedback. So this is I was told I could bring the same document that I had from 2 months ago. Nothing's been changed in it. So if you're asking for feedback, you're either ignoring feedback or you're just choosing to not incorporate or being directed to not incorporate it. So I'm a little frustrated that I'm looking at the same plan from 2 months ago without any feedback incorporated in it. It rubs me wrong that this body who has to implement this is not being considered as a stakeholder in this discussion, or is being ignored as a stakeholder in this discussion.
Well, I certainly don't intend to ignore you. So I will construe this to be me misunderstanding what it is that this board wants to see, because our expectation is to find something that does absolutely fit. When we were at the last meeting 2 months ago, we were asked to clarify a handful of questions. Some of those were clarify how we came up with decisions about where residential was appropriate. There was some discussion about any type of multifamily residential out here and how that should be incorporated, but I don't know that I got clear direction to remove anything in particular on that. So I'm open to what we need to do, and that's why we're here to get some more conversation about specifics.
Yeah, so my recollection is there was conversation about the fact that there is existing residential that people were concerned about being shown kind of going away, and how would that affect their home value if they're trying to sell it, and the plan says that it shouldn't be there. We have approved a residential project for an area that you want open space. So how is that being factored in? We talked about having, I believe, maybe a diagram with some concentric circles that talked about, existing residential would stay as it is. And, in this first circle, because we know it's existing, might limit that as it goes out further. Talked about potentially adding specific language about solar being applicable in this area. In some of these open space and agricultural areas, we know that certain portions of the town are favorable to solar, and this might be a good place for it because solar panels don't care how loud it is. We talked about the fact that the entire report talks about no residential, no residential, no residential, and then shows residential, although it is multifamily, and that the language needs to be modified throughout there so that we don't say no, 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 and then show a diagram that says yes. So those were some of the things that I remember off the top of my head that were asked. And I know that some of my peers up here feel like we're kind of surprised that no changes were made in this, whether graphically or text wise, since our last discussion. And you have to remember, when we make these changes, one of the things that we're looking at when people come before us for projects is this in fitting with the comprehensive plan? And so we need to make sure that this adequately represents what our group can justify when we're dealing with petitioners that have to go through that test.
Certainly understand. Maybe throw a couple things out there, a little bit of clarification on these. So when we talk about existing residential going away, this is a future land use diagram, which does not take away any existing rights of what's there. So we are not recommending anybody change the way they're using their land. There's nothing.
I understand that, but if you're a resident that owns that property and somebody wants to come and buy it, and somebody says, well, what can I do with this property in the future? And they see that we don't want it to be residential. Does that have an impact on that person's property values? And that's where there was a suggestion that if you had some diagram with maybe these concentric rings coming out from the airport that said, look, there is support for the existing residential that exists in this area, just not for, new residential in that area. Something along those lines, just making sure that, the folks that own the property don't feel like they're trying to be shoot out of their property at the behest of this comprehensive plan.
Okay, that can certainly be added. I will point out that there is already language in here about solar, and there has been from the beginning.
Okay, I was not.
In the solar language in general says solar can be a compatible use. It does recommend that you do a glare study beforehand. which is standard practice
Thank
for.
goodness the airport's already done that for us as part of the next era project. So we know it's good at this point. Can you tell me where that is listed in here? Because I was not able to find that previously, and I very well could have overlooked it.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I say that in the right spot.
My apologies for making you search through the document.
It's in chapter 3 somewhere, but specifically it's under on page 44. We talk about glare produced from reflective surfaces can blind pilots. We talk about solar farms are potential, but that measures can be taken on those. It goes on to say specifically related to solar projects, recommend any solar development be subject to a glare or glint analysis in coordination with standards. So
Yeah.
certainly something can be done. We can add more language to that to support that stronger.
I think it's maybe less under the visual obstructions heading and more specifically in the land use plan to note that this is, open space, agricultural, or, solar. Something, more of a, it's intended for this versus, right now it's almost in an exception class or I don't know how to describe it.
I follow what you're
A little bit
saying.
more forward.
As a land
facing
use that
note.
you are accepting.
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Well, we can certainly make those changes to this and get that clarified. I think that we can certainly work with staff and update a diagram about where existing residential is appropriate. And I guess I would just again come back and say any existing residential is more than welcome to stay. And I think what we're trying to say is if it changes, that these are maps of illustrating what types of residential that should become, but we certainly can clarify that further. Okay. I am happy to answer any other questions that you do have. I think we've, if that's the sense of the board, we can certainly make those changes and come back with some clarifications to this.
For the property that's south of the airport that you've got listed as open space, it's currently zoned, I believe it's R2. And so I guess, and I know in the plan, they've got some areas they've talked about that they would have, no houses built. How does that line up with, the overlay of that property? This looks a little bit bigger than what, where they kind of had said they weren't going to have any houses built. This looks like it's going to encroach pretty significantly on that property's rights to develop under the R2 zoning.
That is a conflict in the plan as it has been developed, which was written prior to the decisions of last month. And that's part of what we need to get clarification on is what do we want this plan to say related to that. But the plan till this point said, hey, that's a problematic area because at some point, if that long-term runway extension ever occurs, then property in that area would need to have the homes removed before you could do that runway extension. And so what the plan ultimately said in that condition was, that you're either gonna have to rezone it away from that, or you're gonna have to buy it. And those kind of almost mean the same thing because they're, the impacts of that property owner. So that's what it has said to this point. Do you want to have if we want to take that out, we certainly can, but it is going to create, some challenges at some point that will have to be dealt with.
With the zoning, regardless, obviously this is a guide, but with the zoning it has, they've got the rights to build, the R2. To be perfectly honest, if it comes to us and they ask for nothing, it's our obligation to approve it based on the ordinances of Zionsville.
Certainly understand.
It's, So.
I think it just comes back to, this is that development hasn't happened yet. It's still in process. And what do you want from a policy standpoint here to back that up? That if it was to change, what do you want it to be in that situation? Do you want it to be, you want this to endorse housing, or do you want to say, hey, maybe that's not the best thing? You've got to decide what that is. I know you've got the issue with what the entitlements of that property were. But until that's built, it's still a little bit of an open question that you guys have to give us some direction on how you want to handle that.
Anything else?
The last time you guys presented, there was a number, and it's in the draft here, it said $430 million in economic impact to the community in Zionsville. Where's that? And I think it was questioned a little bit by myself. And where's that number coming from?
That was an independent study. You probably know better than me the answer to that one.
That was actually a study that was commissioned several years ago by Aviation Indiana, and that is something that is currently under review. The state of Indiana, through the Office of Aviation, is currently doing an update to that. They're currently doing all of the data collection right now, so there will be a new number forthcoming in probably the next 12 months as a part of their economic impact and system plan update. But that historic number was developed as a part of that study. There are quite a bit of information that went into that study. I was not part of it. So to talk to specifically the validity of the different elements of that, we know that the study had some fairly high numbers across the state. So, there is a bit of concern about, is it larger than it should be? I would argue that with the amount of activity that's happened since that last study, we do anticipate a fairly significant number, but to tell you exactly what that's going to be, it would be premature.
And was that number just for Zionsville, or was that for the airport community?
That was the influence area. So it wasn't just
So
the
it was
town of
mostly
Zionsville.
Hamilton County.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, it's the influence area of the airport as a whole.
Airport is already a major economic engine for Zionsville surrounding areas. Okay, you got it in there, surrounding areas.
Yep, we know that there's a
Alright,
significant
so-
amount of
but-
business
but
that
what you're
contribute
saying,
to
this
it.
number that could be coming out in the next 12 months could be lower than what it currently is?
It may be higher. We're, again, it's up for review right now. I know that, there's more activity happening at the airport today than we had back in that day. I do know that the consultants who are working on it are breaking it down so that you're going to be able to see the various aspects of it. So direct economic impact of what's happening at the airport because of jobs that are based at the airport, those that are coming from activity that happened because of the airport being there. So businesses that are flying in, doing business in the local community, be it Zionsville, Westfield, Noblesville, et cetera. And so what that influence area is. So it'll be broken down so you can see a better understanding of that. It won't be just a single lump number.
So, but we won't be voting on that number. We got to make a decision on
Correct.
this.
We're about 12 months away from that.
Okay.
So I've got a question. We see all the renditions of potential future state with the airport kind of community, whatever you want to call it. I mean, are there examples across the United States that are representative of what's being shown in this? And it seems like it's a pretty aggressive, concept. I mean, obviously it's probably 20, 30 years out. I don't know what the time frame of this is, but where can we point to say, here's what this would look like that's actually in place right now?
Sure. It's a good question. We're currently right now working on about 4 other airports right now across the country. So we recently did a update. It's now almost 5 years ago now for Fort Wayne and their general aviation airport, Smithfield. So we did a very similar study that actually was much more aggressive than what we're showing here in terms of it wasn't a strategic plan. It went straight to the zoning ordinance. So we developed a base zoning ordinance that's for the city of Fort Wayne and Allen County. We're currently working with the city of Oshkosh, Wisconsin, to revise their zoning ordinance to better address current needs, very similar to what you see here, where we're trying to find a balance of buildability, but yet compatible uses. We're also working in Hartford, Iowa, doing a land use plan for them as well. Very similar. So also general aviation airports. So, you know, the graphic that Corey showed that showed the area of influence from the FAA. You know, in a perfect world, the FAA would love all of that area to be clear of any sort of development. That way we provide a clear area. That's not a, you know, a realistic scenario. So through this effort, what we were trying to do is find a balance that we could preserve development around the airport, but yet keep compatible uses and, you know, keep it so that we did provide a blend. You know, the past ordinances, as Corey has outlined here, you know, had a mix. And so we tried to preserve that mix. We could have come back with an alternative, and it's certainly, you know, if the commission directed us that way, to take out residential development, instead focus more on commercial that's, you know, considered more compatible than residential. We didn't feel that that was a direction that we thought the commission was interested in. So that's why we've tried to find some residential components that would be considered compatible. And that's kind of the direction that we really take across the country. We're trying to find that blend because, as discussed with the earlier proposal before ours, you know, there's a demand for housing in almost every community that we work in. And unfortunately, we're finding those conflicts between the areas of influence with the airports, coupled with the needs for the airports to develop. And so it's trying to find that balance of where can we find a happy medium where we aren't going to create concerns for the quality of life for the residents around those areas, but yet provide a measure of safety for the airport and those residents.
Well, I appreciate the answer, but I don't know if it really answered my question. I was wondering, does any place exist that has started development that is an airport community like you're presenting? Is there some place that it's already happened or is being built? I mean, where can we point to? Or is this just the hope that in 30 years, I'm just curious, I want to understand, has this been done anywhere in the United States at this point in time?
You mean like the airport district that we're proposing?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got other places that have developed some of these. Most of them are out west where we're getting more where they're a little more progressive in terms of the land use components of those mixed use developments. So we're seeing, you know, retail on the bottom, upper space development. There's a couple in California that are clients of Meaden's Hunts that have developed some of these. And again, a lot of that is more retrofitting that we're trying to figure out how do we best leverage demands on the local community. Erie, Pennsylvania right now is looking at a mixed use development, very similar to yours, leveraging airport owned property that they've purchased for noise compatibility concerns and looking at how do they repurpose that property to get it back on the tax rolls. So, you know, I think yours is one of the more challenging ones only because a lot of it is currently resident or agricultural. And so trying to find ways to blend that so that it just doesn't stay agricultural.
All right.
And then Dave, to answer your question, Fishers, the airport over there, has started to develop some commercial properties on their grounds. I've a question related to this. So the airport sits within Zionsville, correct? But it's actually owned by Hamilton County.
Right.
So does the airport grounds then pay property taxes back into Zionsville?
No, I think the answer was asked before. That was no.
So then any kind of commercial development or commercial structures on the airport grounds don't pay property taxes?
Ultimately, that's correct. I mean, that's the quandary that any municipality that has an airport deals with. The airport itself, like you described, Fishers, Hamilton County, that airport is owned by or run by Indianapolis Airport Authority. So any commercial that if the airport authority is actually building that and leasing that out, that is not generating tax dollars for the community. Now, maybe they sold that off. I simply don't know that, and it's privately developed or there's some other arrangement. But that is a concept where that could come to Boone County, that the airport authority, Hamilton County Airport Authority, chooses over time to develop commercial buildings and move forward with their own land use plan. And that land use plan is not generating tax dollars, but still places the same complexity and challenges, traffic, so on and so forth. So this is that crossroads that the town is at. Do you plan for growth on and be a tax base? Or do you not do anything and the airport authority could potentially move forward years from now? I'm not saying that's going to happen. But yeah, you're touching on a very interesting point.
Well, the only business I can think of, like right by the airport, is that rental place that we approved. Don't they have to pay property taxes?
Northside trailer?
Yeah.
That's off campus. That's
Okay.
a privately owned piece of property.
So the airport area that they own is not the full areas that you're seeing on these land use maps. It's a smaller area than is on the land use map. So that's something important to remember on this, that it's not even that blue area. It's a much smaller area. That's one of the reasons why we did designate employer districts separate from the airport, to make sure that that was not joined at the hip, that there was a little bit of separation that says you can develop separate from being under the umbrella of the airport.
So that means anything developed separate of the airport is at a financial disadvantage, because anything on the airport property gets a 3% property tax abatement built in. So basically any private developer is competing with a tax-free government entity, so to speak.
And that's why we set these land use plans up, to give you some precedent when that, that comes before you.
Something that
you can
nobody's gonna wanna
negotiate
do.
that accordingly.
So in other words, well, whatever.
So, I mean, so like I'll use this because it's been discussed earlier, Cato property where we just approved the primary plat. So if the airport purchased that become part of that airport district, that there's no taxes on it or is that gonna, or are they limited currently to the space that they own, the land that they own relative to the taxing authority is the question I've got.
That's a challenging question, from the FAA's perspective. If the airport used federal dollars for it to purchase the property, then the FAA would expect it to become part of the airport and be considered airport property. So I'm
Okay.
guessing it would be tax exempt. If it remains Hamilton County owned and not necessarily property of the airport, then that would be a little separate issue.
All right.
Correct me on my history. Hamilton County got a grant after they purchased the airport from the federal government to pay for the purchase, did they not? That's, that, if I remember, that's the history on that. I was a little younger then, but
I would have to look to Bill, I'm not sure.
But I think you're right.
County bought the property from. Have them step forward, name, address, please.
I'm Bill Fry, I'm the president of the Airport Authority. The address is 11329 State Road 32. I believe the property was purchased by Hamilton County first, the property itself. The FAA has paid for the improvements, the runway and so forth. Now, when we bought, they have helped purchase some land, for instance, the land that we recently purchased within the last 5 years for the runway extension. That was paid for by the federal government. And as far as the question that came up before about businesses on the airport can only have airport related businesses on it. So, you couldn't put a Walmart on the airport, for example. It would have to be something that had to do with aviation, either a fixed based operator or a corporate hangar like Bex. So, did that answer the question?
it does, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Do we have an action? How do we want to proceed?
Either trust they make changes or we can ask them to come back.
I mean, with the open area, I guess relative to that the residential too, I mean, obviously, as a plan commission, if they come forward to us with an R2 residential zoning and they meet all the obligations, I mean, we have to approve it. I mean, so I guess the fact that that's inconsistent, I mean, I can live with that. I mean,
They did set back.
Well, they had an opening, but I would guarantee that if you take a look at this map,
Oh,
it's bigger than what that space was.
It is.
Well, the airport has its recourse if they so choose at any point in time.
And you let me buying it or what?
Yeah, no, they have the ability to take it.
But I
Anytime
mean,
they
it's, I mean, obviously this is a guide, but if there's
Yeah.
ordinances in place.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can live with that. I mean, you've got, if you're comfortable with the language relative to putting more stronger language relative to the solar panels. And are we comfortable with the residential district? I mean, basically apartment buildings, multifamily structures.
It's gonna suck, it's gonna be noisy, it's gonna be low income, it's not gonna be market rate. You know, is there a need for that in Zionsville? Yeah.
Yeah.
It just is unfortunate that that gets built in an area that, you know, we talk about building cheaper homes and forcing people into those homes. Well, you build a low income housing next to an airport, and they don't have an option, so they have to go into it. So, I mean, it is what it is.
I mean, I don't think the intent is to build low income housing. I mean, I think it's.
You're gonna get tax credit financed HUD housing in this location. You won't get anything
Right.
other than that. Nobody's gonna pay for an apartment right next to an airport that can afford to be down at a